Justify. He's won the last two.
Two.
There's a big race coming up June the 9th in New York called the Belmont. I don't know how many people out there are race fans that I could say I'm one. I've been one. My father took me to Wheeling Downs racetrack. We went every day. When I was 6 and 7 years old, it was across the bridge. So I knew the jockeys, I knew the horses. I even knew Bill Elias, the guy that owned the track. And I was 6, 7. So I studied those horses and racing and all that. And it just gets in your blood. But anyway, this Belmont's coming up June the 9th in New York. Now, the big deal on this stuff is to win that Triple Crown. The three big races, and they are the Kentucky Derby, and then the second one they had a few days ago is the Preakness, and then the third one is the Belmont. And you got to win those three for a horse to win the Triple Crown. And it wasn't done for like 37 years, and then American Pharoah did it in 2015. But if you look at these horses and study them, these are the best horses in the world. And I think they're all 3-year-olds. But now if there's a horse in Saudi Arabia that's good, real good, don't worry, they'll fly that horse here and put him in this race. The winner gets a lot of money. I don't know what the amount is this year, but I know the Kentucky Derby, I think it's like $3 million. That was a few weeks ago. The problem here is the Kentucky Derby runs, and 2 weeks later the Preakness runs, and now the Belmont. And when you're running with the best horses in the world, you know, even though it's you have the best horse, it takes a lot out of you because these horses are really pushing you. Now, last week, this Justify. Okay, Justify won the Derby. He didn't look like Justify didn't have much trouble in the Derby. But then last week, in that in the second part of it, the second race, the Preakness, up around Baltimore, he did good, but near the end of the race, he had about four horses right on him, and I thought he barely won by a nose. And then after the race was over, they said, well, at the Derby, he hurt his foot a little bit, foot or ankle. But he ran that race, but it didn't bother him. Now, as far as I know, he's running this race in New York. If there's any way you can get to New York for June the 9th, go see the Belmont, because there'll be probably, I don't know how many people will be there. I would say maybe 600,000-700,000. I've been there, and it's a good race. It's outside of New York City. You could even fly into one of the airports of New York and take a cab or Uber or whatever and go right to the track. And then you could watch the race, and then you can go back to New York City that night, celebrate or whatever, or if you lose, just go back to the airport and come back to where you're from. But now, the one thing about it, the Kentucky Derby had these horses. This horse, Bravazzo, they're thinking that horse might beat this Justify on Saturday. He's a good horse. And then, in addition to him, they had Kentucky Derby horses that run Hofburg, Vino Rosso, and Free Drop Billy. And also in the Preakness, they had this horse Tenfold. And these horses can run. I'll tell you, I was watching Justify. I was watching on television as hard as I could. But Justify was doing good, running. And these first two races were in the wet, sloppy track. The Kentucky Derby is all wet, and it's harder to run. And then the one last week, the Preakness was all wet, mud. So you figure that could hold down some horses unless you're used to running in mud and sloppy tracks. Now, I don't know what the weather will be for June the 9th in New York, but I'll tell you, the way that Preakness ended up, I really thought Justify was going to get beat, but he did win by a nose because there are 4 or 5 horses that were coming hard. Now, Justify's jockey is Mike Smith. He's been in it for a long time. He's 52 years old, and he has won the Triple Crown one time, all 3 of these big races. But not many people have done it, have won the Triple. And but I like this horse, Justify, but all these other horses, some of them knew he was going to win the Derby, so a couple of them didn't even run in the Preakness. They're waiting for this horse race, the Belmont. And there's one big problem with the Belmont, and when I went there I could see it. This Belmont race is way longer than the other 2 races. It's a long race, and like in this Preakness, you could see there were 4 or 5 horses were running as hard as they could, and this horse won by a nose, but it's Justify won by a nose. But I don't know if that horse race, and I've been there, I've seen it, if it had to go another pretty good distance, which is what Belmont does, it's just a long race. And one reason they don't run all these horses every 2 weeks is because they wear them down. You know, I mean, even though they're the best horses in the world, I think they're in the 3-year-olds, they don't want to run them every 2 weeks because horses like anybody else, and they can get sick, they can get hurt, a lot of things happen. But my opinion on this race is, and I'm not a bettor, I can't say I never bet on a horse race because I have. You know, if I go to the track, I'm going to bet. And now the U.S. has passed and making betting legal all over the United States. But I have to say that I don't think Justify is going to win this Belmont. It's a long race, a long track, and I think some of these other horses, the way they were coming 4 or 5 in this last race at Preakness, they were coming, and I thought Justify might have lost, but he won by a nose. But now if this track has to go another 50 yards, I don't know the exact footage on it, I mean, those horses were coming. They're coming hard. And my prediction is Justify will not win the Belmont. One of these other horses that were running with him in the Preakness is going to win the Belmont, and there will not be a Triple winner this year. Thank you.